Okay, so following the rule and prior on tonk and so on, anyone's first reaction to tonk is, I think, well, among the first reactions you might have to tonk is that there isn't a truth table for tonk. The truth table for a sign tells you how to use that sign. Actually, some of you guys, put up your hand if you don't know what I mean when I say truth table. It depends whether you've done elementary logic, which is not a requirement for this class. A truth table for a sign says for A and B. If A is true and B is true, then is the whole thing true? Yes. What about, let's see if I can do this. Okay, if one is true, if A is true and B is false, false. If A is false and B is true, false. And if they're both false, false. Oh, you think so? Okay, and there are no other possibilities. Right? Okay. So one way of thinking about tonk is if you can do that for tonk, then you would know how to use a sign. The truth table for the sign tells you how it should be used. But that way of thinking about signs like and is really antithetical to Wittgenstein's way of thinking about it. That way of thinking about it is to say the truth table is your set of instructions on how to use the sign, and you derive from that your knowledge of how to go on. But Wittgenstein's point is, what does it mean that you grasp the truth table, that you have some pattern like that in front of your mind, that you have a picture of the truth table in front of your mind when you're talking? The truth table can't tell you how to go on. All that there is to constitute your understanding of the sign is the actual use that you make of it. And in general, talking about truth and reference can't guide you in how to use a sign. Knowledge of what has to be the case for a sentence to be true can't be what guides your use of the sentence. You just use the sentences. You just speak the way you do. And the talk about reference that we've been focusing on, reference and truth, that we've been focusing on since the start of the class is completely beside the point. It's not the fundamental thing about your understanding of language. The fundamental thing in your understanding of language is your custom or practice or whatever it is of using the sign. Okay, that's plain enough so far as the general picture so far goes. There are places, I mean, tonk is one extreme example where it's very hard to believe this view of Wittgenstein's. Because with tonk, if someone says, I'm just going to talk using tonk, and look, I can prove things, as people pointed out last time, you can prove things much more easily now than you could have before. Isn't that great? It's hard to believe that's right. And you can't write a truth table for tonk. So isn't it that you don't really have any clear instructions for the use of the sign tonk? Another kind of case where it's hard to believe that your use of language can't be criticized is offensive language. I just want to start out by looking at this, partly because it's kind of engaging and interesting, what it is about language that can be offensive. The idea isn't that just that people can be very insulting sometimes and say the most wounding things, because after all, you might say to me you're stupid or ugly or boring or whatever, and that might be very distressing, right? These are whatever terrible things you like to say. These are just insults. The language itself is fine. I mean, some people are boring. If you see what I mean, that's just a fact. Nobody's insisting that the word boring should be stripped from the language just because it can be used in insults. But with lots of language, there are many examples of words or phrases that people think are in themselves objectionable. When people talk about being politically correct in your use of language, the idea is not just that the language is being used to frame insults, because something perfectly objective and unexceptionable language could be used to frame insults. It's that there is something wrong with the language itself. I think that you can think of this in the model of tonk. You can think of tonk as a very clean laboratory case of unacceptable language. I mean, I do not want to spend the class in some kind of bloodbath of objectionable language, so I'm going to use a couple of more or less made-up examples of, as it were, offensive language, if you see what I mean. But I'm sure that for every single person here, there's going to be some word or phrase that if you just heard someone using it, you would get furious, right? It would hit a button. So bear that in mind as we go through. Right? I'm going to discuss toy cases, but there are plenty of real cases. So let me take just as my first toy case, latte drinker used as a term of abuse. Right? So there's that way in which you can say he is a typical latte drinker, right? You know the sort. And suppose you're asking, well, how would you describe the use that this person is making of that phrase, latte drinker? You're a good Wittgensteinian, you say, okay, what does it mean? How do I characterize the way this sign is used? Well, for and, the input rule is, if you get A and if you B, then you can move from that to A and B. Right? So for latte drinker, the introduction rule would be something like the input rule would be, well, this person drinks lattes. Right? That's what it takes to classify someone as a latte drinker. But then what's the output from saying that someone is a typical latte drinker? Well, what you mean, the implication you're drawing there is, this is an elitist intellectual, out of touch with ordinary people, doesn't understand their concerns. I see we have at least one latte drinker in the class. So, okay, I was trying to keep away from examples that are close to home, but okay. There's something wrong with this way of using latte drinker. Like with the word tonk, if you just introduce the word tonk into the language, you can now do things that you couldn't do before. You can make moves, you can prove things that you couldn't prove before. If you introduce this word used like this into the language, you can now do things that you couldn't do before. Just from observing someone's coffee drinking habits, you can draw conclusions about whether they're in touch with ordinary people. That's what's strange about this kind of use of language. Just having that term in the language has a kind of power of its own. It lets you reason in ways you couldn't reason unless you had that term in the language. Let me give another example. Okay, so you can put it by saying there's no balance here between the input and the output. Right? Given that this is all the input you're requiring, just observation of someone's coffee drinking habits, how do you get that out of it? Well, the answer is that's just the meaning of the sign. That's the way the sign works. But surely for a sign to be working properly, there has to be a kind of balance between the input to the sign and the output from the sign. That's what's going wrong with this kind of phrase, latte drinker. 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 Another way to put it is, you don't know what it takes to be true for someone to be a latte drinker. If this is the input rule and this is the output rule, what are you saying when you say that someone is a latte drinker? Are you just making a remark about their coffee drinking habits? Or are you drawing these conclusions? Or are you making a remark about their political views? There's really no answer to that question. You don't know what claim you're making on the world when you say Bill is a latte drinker or Sally is a latte drinker. Is it a remark about their coffee drinking habits, or is it a remark about their intellectualism? There's no answering that question. This has been set up in such a way that you can't answer the question. So part of what's going wrong here is there isn't any balance between the input and the output, and you don't know what it takes to be true to say of someone that this person's a latte drinker. Here's another example. I just made this up, right? So I hope in the first instance that there's no such thing as a yad, right? So, and if there are any, then I hope there are none here. And I apologise if there are. But okay. Okay. Suppose that this is just some ethnic group G. I suppose that's we agree that there is such an ethnic group. And then the input rule for the use of the word yad is they're from this ethnic group. Right? If you want to know on what basis can you say X is a yad, well, it's they're from this ethnic group. You find yourself confronted with someone from this ethnic group, you have the right to say that person is a yad. And then the output rule here is, given that you got it that X is a yad, then you can draw from that the conclusion X is violent and unpredictable. Look out. So if you've just got this word yad in your language, you can do something that you couldn't do before. Observing that they're from ethnic group G, you couldn't move from that without the word yad to the conclusion that they're violent and unpredictable. Right? I mean, that would require a lot of premises. You need to prove lots of things about this ethnic group. But now I just did a trick. I just introduced this word, yad, and this is the way it works. This is the pattern of use that it has. And now I can do something I couldn't do before. I can get to this dramatic conclusion on this innocuous basis. So there's no balance here, and you don't know what it is for X as a yad to be true. Suppose you say of someone, this person's a yad. Are you just saying they're from this ethnic group, or are you also saying that they're violent? They're violent and unpredictable. The rules leave it poised. There is no way of answering the question what it takes for this to be true that X is a yad. So what that makes it look like is we need the bit in the middle. It's not enough just to have the pattern of use here. There has to be such a thing as knowing what it takes for X as a yad to be true. Otherwise, you don't really know what you're saying. So anyone who uses racist or offensive language is doing something like this. That's what happens. You take a term that has a pattern of use such that now you've got this pattern of use in your language. You can make these moves. I'm not going to go through a bloodbath of actual examples, but I'm sure you can do this in real time, think of cases and how it works. And that's why the language in itself can be objectionable. It's not just that this is insulting. It's that if you have this word governed by this kind of pattern of use in your vocabulary, it is itself going to distort your thinking. That's how the language itself can be objectionable. And people say, well, we've got to root this out. We've got to stop talking this way. And there might be, so far these are generally negative cases. There might be more benevolent cases. Take a term like one of God's children. Right? I mean, when someone says one of God's children, what was the input rule? I imagine the input rule is just something like, this is a human being. If you're confronted with a human being, then you can say, this is one of God's children. But what's the output from this is one of God's children? Well, you've got to treat them with kindness and sympathy. Right? You didn't get that just from this person being a human being. But now you've got this rule in the language. Things work better than they did before. There's still a lack of balance between the input and the output. And you still don't really know what someone's saying when you say this. So it's subject to criticism, but it might be a more benevolent kind of case than the other cases. Okay? So that's offensive language. That's a quick primer on offensive language. Is that persuasive? That's what's wrong with offensive language. Okay? Well, I'm grateful that I'm not getting a torrent of examples. Okay. So bearing that in mind, suppose you go back and look at Ponk. So with the introduction and elimination rules here, the input and output rules, sorry, that's not written correctly. I guess I can't do this in real time. The B here should be here, right? Do you see what I mean? Yeah. Okay. And as people pointed out last time, the obvious thing that's wrong with this is that you can use it, once you've got the sign tonk in your language, you can now prove anything on any basis. Yeah. So you can get contradictions. That's why it's just obviously wrong. But it's like a laboratory case of these other examples of offensive language. You've got a lack of balance between what the input is and what the output is. As input, you only needed A. So how come you can get B as output? As input, you only needed B. So how come you can get A as output? There's a lack of balance between input and output there. And it is like a laboratory case of these other examples of offensive language. Or again, you can say, well, it's not that it's not just that there's a lack of balance. If someone says to you, A tonk B, if someone says to you, the cat is in the mat, tonk, the sun is shining, what have they said? You don't know what has to be the case for that to be true. So this is a perfectly well-defined pattern of use, but in some sense the meaning here is illegitimate. Now, in this kind of case, you really can have a custom of doing this. You really can be, that is how people typically defend their use of language when it's criticized. They say, but we all talk like this. It is the way of my people. This is just how we describe what's going on. That's the language. There is a custom of talking like this. And in fact, we don't regard that as a legitimate defense. In fact, we say the custom is wrong. Now, in Wittgenstein's approach, that should be impossible. The custom is bedrock. The custom does not stand in need of justification. When you're describing the custom, your spade is turned. It does not stand in need of justification. But this shows you a way in which any custom of using words you could demand a justification, and very often you could give the justification. You could say, actually, it is balanced. In this case, it's not balanced. But with and To get A, to prove A and B, you've got to prove A and you've got to prove B. And then what conclusions can you derive? You can derive A and you can derive B. Well, look at that. That's balanced, right? You can get out exactly what you put in. In these cases, you get out far more than you put in. That's what's going wrong. But it's not just that you can get out far more than you put in. Right. Suppose we go back to the example I was giving last time. There are cases where you can get out far less than you put in. These are subtler, weirder cases. But consider star, where here's the introduction rule for star. If you are, in order to prove A star B, you've got to prove A and you've got to prove B. Okay? That's all right. No trick so far. That's all right. That's just like and. Yes? That's just like and. And then what can you derive from A star B? Well, if you've got A star B, and if from A you can prove C, and if from B you can prove C, then you can conclude C on the basis of A star B alone. So it's like or, right? If you've got A star B and you can prove C on the hypothesis of A, and you can prove C on the hypothesis of B, then you can say, well, since one or the other, A star B, it follows that C. That's okay. So that's the elimination rule. That's the output rule. Is that okay? Right? Is that a well-defined sign? Star. I'm going to get a contradiction using star. Put your hand up if you think it's well-defined. Okay, what about if you think I'm going to get a contradiction? Can you put your hand up if you're fairly sure I'm not going to get a contradiction? Yeah, I mean, I think that's right. That, given that you're demanding so much to prove A star B, you're demanding you've got both of them, you've got the A and you've got the B, then you're being very cautious in what you have as output, right? Because you're demanding that on the basis of A you'll be able to prove C, and on the basis of B you'll be able to prove C. But since you had to prove both A and B in order to establish A star B in the first place, really, it would be enough to prove C on the basis of A, or to prove C on the basis of B. This is demanding you do it both ways. So this is kind of belt and braces. This is super cautious. So you're not going to generate any contradictions or anything like that. So this is subtler than Tonk, and it's subtler than the offensive language we're talking about. It's not that you get wild stuff out. The trouble is you don't get enough out. And the puzzling thing is, if you had to prove both A and B to get A star B, then how come once you've got A star B, you have to be so cautious? You do have to be so cautious, but why is that? It doesn't make sense. If you've got A star B, you should be able to include A, and you should be able to include B. You don't have to do this strange, complicated formulation. You see what I mean? Yep. That's right. If you start with A and go to A or B, you can't get from that to A. Yep. Right. That's right. But okay, good. So why is that? Why would it be wrong to say I can get to A from that? Right. But I put it to you. The problem is that you have another introduction rule for OR, which is B. So, well, this is working in the margins, but okay, B, A, or B. Right. There's a second introduction rule for A, and so either of them will work. Yep. And the problem is, if you then had proved this on the basis of B, and then had the rule, I can derive A, that would go wrong. Right. That would be like Tonk. Yeah, I'm just trying to spell out the obvious here. That's why it would be wrong to allow the derivation of A from A or B. You see what I mean? Yeah. It's because you've got the two introduction rules here. Yeah. Now, suppose you did not have two introduction rules. Suppose the only introduction rule was from A, you can derive A or B. You can't derive A or B from B alone. Would this rule then be okay? What would be pointless? Going to A or B? Yeah, why go through the rigmarole? But okay, but that question is often asked about logic. How should I put it? Suppose that's not whether it's pointless, but just, you can ask that about A and B, right? Because you need to prove A, you need to prove B, you get A and B. And then what can you conclude from it? Well, you can conclude A and you can conclude B. So you might say, big deal, what was the point of that? You see what I mean? So this is like that, yeah. But nonetheless, and is okay. And is not like Tonk or the offensive language or whatever, right? So if you had the input rule was from A, I can get to A or B, and then you said, and I can get to A from A or B, would that be okay? Yeah? I think that would be fine. Myself, but I'm happy to. I would welcome resistance. But okay, if you had to show to get A to prove A or B, and there would be no help to prove B, yeah, then you know that in order to get to A or B, I had to get A. So once I've got A or B, I can say, well, to get that I must have an A. So I can get out what I put in. I put A in, so I can get A out. Yeah, it's different if I've got the other rule from B. I can get A or B, because then I might have got it the easy way by getting B. You see what I mean? And then it wouldn't be right to say that now you can get A out. But if this is the only input rule, then that output rule would be fine. Yeah. And the thing about this case is, I had to work so hard to get A star B. I had to get both A and B. So why can't I just get both of them out? But the rule is telling you can't get both of them out. You can only get out what follows from both A and B. You can't get out anything that follows from just one of them. I mean, suppose I said to you, you've won $500. Good news, I say, you've won $500. Star, the sun is shining. What would you make of that? I mean, on the one hand, how do I know that's true? You've won $500, star, the sun is shining. Well, to establish it, I had to prove A and I had to prove B.